Okay, looking a little wild. All right. So we're going to look at chapter 15 in fundamentals. Now, this chapter is not specifically about massage, but if we remember, one of the tenets of a massage therapy practice is health messaging. And so this chapter is going to give you information where you can provide education related to generally accepted exercise, nutrition, uh, coping skills, that sort of thing. You can share that kind of information with your clients. Um, we certainly can work from an educational model, and if there is some complexity related to the various areas in this wellness chapter, um, then maybe referral to a professional that is an expert in these areas would be indicated. And then this chapter is also about you taking care of yourself and finding ways to create some sort of level of work-life balance and to feed yourself well and sleep well and get exercise that is going to support your physiology as well as your quality of life. And so this chapter serves certainly multiple purposes with this. So let's get with it. And there's my page burst. Whoops, there's the page burst. Okay, so chapter 15, wellness and self-care for the massage therapist and client education. I'm trying to find my cursor here. There it is. Okay, so let's look at our table of contents. You know how to do this now. So the first thing we're going to take a look at here is what is well-being. And then we've got nutrition, fitness, how we manage our ability to reestablish homeostasis after a stressful day, on a physical level, and on an emotional level, and on a spiritual level as well. So let's go. As far as this information being tested on the NBLEX, you may have some questions around this, such as the nutritional component of it may be related to the digestive system, so it would overlap with Chapter 12 and Essential Science. The exercise, there may be some questions about the difference between aerobic and anaerobic and that sort of thing, but this is not about you becoming an expert in this area for sure. But these are things that have, the concepts in here are generally accepted as valuable. They're evidence informed, and they're not off on some sort of tangent somewhere. You got to watch that. You got to watch the tangent situation. And that most often occurs in the nutritional arena, and to a lesser extent in the exercise arena. So here are your key terms. I've got to increase the size on this so I can see it. You know, it's still a little blurry even when I do that. So If it looks like I'm looking at it, maybe you figured that out by now. Because we really are at the end of the textbook, getting close. And that means we're also getting close to the end of your education, at least your entry level. Okay. This box is very comparable to way back when in chapter 4, specifically at the terminology chapter, we talked about World Health Organization's quality of life domains. And this is an offshoot of those. And you can see again how we're wrapping around and looking at similar concepts, similar information, but doing it now in a more experienced and hopefully practical and applicable way. So our first segment here has to do with how we look for a wellness program, but why we may not always implement it. And as you look at yourself in this, you want to also then be realistic on what you expect clients to do. Because if we have unrealistic expectations of our clients, because this is up to them. This is not like a massage therapy session where we can, at least for a short term, through the mechanical force introduction, the massage application, we can, in a short term, change the perception of what's going on in somebody's body, and almost like a reset button for homeostasis a little bit. These things are all things that a person has to do themselves. And that's where it falls apart, is the whole compliance issue or working this into a daily part of your life. And I struggle with this, just like, let's be honest about it. So when you choose what health messages you're going to use, be pragmatic about it, and understand that one of the reasons why people like massage is because we can achieve, at least in the short term, some of these benefits, and the person doesn't have to do anything but show up and have the experience be nurturing and compassionate and pleasurable for them. All right. We have talked about salutogenesis before, a movement toward health. And now we're going to look at it in a little bit more application type of an approach. This is not new. The shifting of perception and self-care way back in the 60s was a reflection of this, and then formalized more in the 70s. But it goes back, if you look at it culturally, this idea of movement towards health. It's just like an assessment. Look for what's working well, not just what's wrong. And so that's kind of where we're at with this concept. So as we look through this on the idea of health promotion, we mostly, as massage therapists, fit in this idea of helping people move towards health, with an understanding that life is stressful and that increased demands on adaptive capacity is going to cause stress and strain of multiple types. And so we're always working towards mitigating those kinds of situations. I mean, I have said in class before, we all have a condition, and it's called life. And so there's a constant demand on us to have an ongoing support of quality of life. So when we think of pathogenesis, the focus is on a fix or a cure. It has the disease as the concept instead of the result. And then we're trying to get rid of that. And so we want to be aware that massage is just not very good at dealing with a specific condition. The evidence-informed results, the evidence-informed research shows that it is this movement, this more generalized support for health and well-being, where our value is most. So this little diagram gives you an idea of where we're going with that and how we function around that. You can learn more about salutogenesis through PubMed. It's a very fascinating study. So these bullet points that are in here, they are reflective of a salutogenic approach to life. So underlying most levels of distress, when people are not feeling as if they have a quality of life, is stress. And not all stress is bad. I mean, we need demands on us. We just getting up and going outside and appreciating the sun, that is a demand. We have to move. But too much stress, multiple stresses at the same time, cumulative stress, that's what starts to really wear people down. And stress has been studied and continues to be studied as an undercurrent of where do we focus in health promotion. And if we can have a better handle on identifying the distress, and when we are reaching our adaptive capacity, and each of us can have our own signals about that. I have a dream that when I am feeling overwhelmed and I am on the edge and I'm not taking care of myself, there's this dream that crops up, and it has many renditions. And I'm not going to tell you what the dream is because it's not always a very nice dream. But it is enough to tell me, you better stop and rethink where you're at and what's going on and what you need to do to be able to reestablish a better balance on what's going on. So when we're looking at stress in general, then we also need to then take a look at, okay, what can we do? And there's multiple stressors coming at us all the time. So there's the stressor itself. So maybe on one particular day, it's it's really cold and nasty and the weather's not very good, and we still have to be out and about and all of that. That's a stressor. Maybe we're having some people around for a gathering um, with all the physical distancing and the masks and everything else during the pandemic that goes with that. Just making sure your bathroom's clean and that, there's getting the food and stuff together. It's out of the norm. And so the more out of the norm something is, which can be very good for us to move away from the norm, but it also demands more adaptive capacity. So how are we going to cope? Well, there's a lot of ways to cope. You can deny, you can avoid, you can shift your mindset. You can drink alcohol or partake in some cannabis, there's lots of things that you can do. I listen to audiobooks a lot, just to get myself away from it a little while. So what are resourceful coping strategies? Because all of our behaviors are trying to support coping. And some of them work really well, but have detrimental effects on the back end of it. And some of them work also very well, but they take a little bit more effort on our part. And some of them are not very good. They worked at one time, the coping strategy. It worked for a situation, but that doesn't mean it's still working. So this is an area where we can also intervene. We can do something about mitigating the stress itself or how we're going to cope with it. And then defensive measures come from protecting our own internal integrity. And if we are constantly feeling like we have to defend ourselves, rightly or not, it doesn't matter. We're going to get into a sympathetic autonomic nervous system fight or flight, because that's what we feel like when we defend ourselves all the time. And then there's well-being and health issues related to that. And we don't always restore and renew, and we're not as peaceful, and we don't get a good night's sleep when we're swirling around in that fight, flight, fear arena. And then sometimes we just got to know how to let go. And that's a very good coping strategy, is to just know when enough is enough, and to get beyond the idea of, oh, I failed or whatever. So this comes back to the idea of explore thyself, and then there's so many options in this. So what works for me may not work for you. So we got to be very careful in the health messaging idea that we work with our clients to not focus on what we did and how it worked for us, but the general ideas with options so that they can explore and find what works for them. Okay. So referring back to chapter 5 and 6 in the research, et cetera, that goes with that, we want to look for ideas around successful coping and maladaptive coping. So here are some bullet points along with that. And then these areas right here, while they will act as a potential solution in the real short term, there are long-term detrimental effects that involve not only us or the individual person, but the people around them. So read through this thoughtfully and pay attention to this box here on 5 or 15.2 here, common stress responses, and see if you not only can be aware of this in terms of identifying through assessment, observation with clients and noticing and paying attention, but also for yourself and the people that are part of your inner circle too. And the sooner you can intervene to reverse this, the higher the quality of life will be and the less potential for breakdown and disease to occur. So here's the section here on stress management. And we talk about life demands, loss and grief. You know, we're all going to experience these things, all of us. And we have ways, inside us, we have ways to navigate this, and as the process of moving through these events in our lives, we can find we can rise again to a state of well-being. That this is going to affect every person. You're not going to come out of a loss or grief situation the same as you went into it. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on how you're able to have the resilience necessary to right yourself so that you can again get on course for a level of quality of life. And remember, intuition doesn't come from the outside. Intuition, talked about this in the business chapter actually, intuition comes from the inside. It's our subconscious, our accumulation of information, knowledge, experiences that if we are quiet enough, that will bubble to our consciousness, and it's good to pay attention to that. Seeking help is really important. Every time a client sees us for massage, they are seeking help. But sometimes we don't have the skills to help them with these issues. So this is where referral comes in, and understanding the nature of different types of professional help that we can educate our clients about. And then having a solid support system. You know, we can have toxic people in our life, just like we can have toxic chemicals in our life that come, you know, they're in the environment, they're around us, and we're not going to change other people. So if we're going to have a coping mechanism around kind of toxic people, then we've got to realize the effort it takes to deal with their behavior, and decide whether or not the effort is worth it. And it isn't always. So this is an internal process here. Now there are some more concrete external things that we can do that allow us to cope better, adapt better. And one of them is our nutrition. And I am not on any fringe on nutrition. but people are. And the only time I will really intervene on the nutrition is if I think that the nutritional plan they are using or investigating is detrimental. So for example, I get real concerned about the high protein keto diet concept, because ketosis, when we are burning uh, fat and we're in ketosis, that's really a non-normal state, and that's not how we are typically pulled. It's typically meant to pull nutrition as fuel, and it gets really hard on the kidneys. And so I will educate people about that if I think that they're really excessive on that focus. Um, if people are potentially way over the edge on nutritional supplements or something, and I've dealt with professional athletes for over half of my career, and they can do that. They're looking for that edge on the performance, and so they are one type of a population that is susceptible to some real extremes in this area. So what's in this section is generally accepted, um, evidence-informed information. And, this is kind of what's out there. It's moderate. There isn't anything that's over the edge on any of this. And so a good nutritional program to support quality of life pretty much falls in this category. And the further away the food is from its natural state, I like to garden, and when I can go out and pick a cucumber and stand right there and eat it, there's a different type of nutritional value there than if it is in pickles, and then pickles with a lot of sugar in them. We talked about this kind of when we talk about essential oils and other, quote, natural things. The more they are altered from their truly picked off the vine natural state, the more it changes. It changes either how we process it or the nutritional value or something. And then also in this is some people will relate their nutritional or food intake based on our concern for our planet and our climate and efficiency of food production. And that's valuable as well. People can hold very tightly to their opinions around food. So I'm always very careful when I interact with them here to not try to superimpose my philosophies around this, and more screen for if there's some behavior in this arena that could be dangerous. As far as the NBLEX exam on that content, there may be, you might need to know the words like protein and lipids and general ideas around it, but certainly not to the level of being a nutritionist. Another area where we can get a little on the outside of the traditional bell curve here is ideas about hydration. And again, from my experience in working with athletes, hydration is a big deal there. And I have seen people drink too much water, which can become really upset the electrolyte balance, et cetera. At the same time, I've seen dehydration and the need to replenish water, and then an imbalance with the electrolytes. And so there's a lot involved here. But we want to, again, not go to any kind of extremes. And we want good quality water, just like we want good quality food. And we want to maintain the type of hydration that supports our body. We are a water being now. We're very watery, and we're held together. All that water is contained in our skin superficial fascia containers. Okay. Also, as we talk about hydration, another category here, fruits and vegetables. This is a nice table. It shows what the, I just said we're watery, and where the water is concentrated. Typically, if there's controversy in the dietary area, it has to do with do you eat meat or do you not eat meat, and the reasons that motivate that. And there is no doubt that production of meat product is harder on the environment, and we're going to probably have to take a look at that in the future. And then there's also concern about the ethics of how we respect other food sources, what type of conditions are food source live animals kept in, and what's the ethics of that. So that's to each individual's decision on that. But there are some ideas around the processing that we can look at through an evidence-based lens. And that's with processed meats, for example. And again, the closer to the natural state, the better it's probably going to be. So, and the environment it's grown in. So I have sourced myself a local organic farm, and I use that resource even if it costs me more. I see that source for vegetables and honey and eggs and some meat products as an investment. It's an investment in my health. So inflammation becomes a factor. And we've talked multiple times about inflammatory processes, just like stress is an underlying generalized factor that contributes to a diminished health capacity. Right along with that is the stress, is the inflammatory issues. So just like stress can be good, it's good in small doses that resolve themselves. It's the same with inflammation. Acute inflammation that is productive is good, but long-term chronic inflammation that is non-productive is not. And we can mitigate, we can alter some of the detrimental inflammatory responses through our diet. Certain kind of foods and that we intake actually do promote non-productive inflammation. So there's a little bit in there. And then there's some talk about the nutritional supplements too. And I'm going to defer back to the more natural state our food sources are, the better. I tend to genetically and some of my lifestyle behaviors, I tend to be pretty inflammatory. I think that was the underlying cause of the heart condition I've talked about before. I always show a little high on the inflammatory markers when I have blood work done. So I am aware of this, and it's one of the areas that I work to behave around. And there are some pretty good studies on some types of supplementation, turmeric, for example, for inflammation. And so, that the Medline Plus has information about herbs and what they're used for and supplements. And so you would want to explore that and use PubMed to confirm that there's been research on it, and make sure you critically read through the research to make sure that it is solid. And then I always recommend you find at least 3 studies that are supportive of a particular concept, different places from different researchers. So now we have very similar things with fitness. And so where does fitness lay within the health messaging idea? And recommendations for general fitness and restorative type exercise falls within the scope of practice in most states, not all. And so we're again having to identify what is prescriptive and what is a solid well-being, health supporting recommendation. So, probably if we're honest, the majority of people are a little on the deconditioned side, but there's also that other end where people are over exercising, and it's not supporting well-being and fitness anymore. In fact, it becomes a detrimental drain. I see a lot of people that have issues related to the exercise program. And, I always go back to how we are designed. And sagittal plane movement using flexion and extension is really about how we get around and reach up and bend down and all that. So the exercise support should be about mobility in the sagittal plane, and the frontal plane is about our balance. And you have to have stability, mobility, balance. You have to have all of those, if you remember from the biomechanics chapter, in order for us to have efficient movement. And we have to have the right level of flexibility and the supportive level of stiffness and stability. We have to support with an exercise program what our body needs to maintain its physiological functions. We're made to move at a steady pace for most of the day. And that's not what we do. I'm sitting here now. I have sat over the course of putting these videos together for you for hours and hours and hours. And that's not how we were designed. And so exercise becomes a way of reversing some of the detrimental effects of our lack of movement and being in static positions. We also, there's heart health and digestive health and mood health and all of that has got tons of evidence that support a moderate exercise program is key. But also is key is moderate. So this goes through and discusses this and looks at it from a variety of ways and gives some suggestions, because it's almost like now we have to supplement our lives with exercise because we don't have it as a natural course of our daily activities. So this gives you all of that information. We know this. See, we all know this. So the question is then why don't we? And that's a much bigger issue than what is exercise. And think of it as a supplement. Typically, going back to the nutrition of food, we would get the nutrition that we need for optimal health from the food that we source to eat. And realistically, we know that we don't. And so then we will use supplementation to replace those elements that we know are deficient in our nutrition. And we can overdo that. And same with exercise. We should, don't you love it when you get shoulded on? We should have the physical movement and aerobics demand and the flexibility. We should have that all as part of how we function in our daily life. But we don't. And so we need to supplement that with exercise. But we can also overdo that. So too much, not enough, just right. This next segment here is about relaxation and relaxation practices like mindfulness. And there are many systems out there on that. Pick one and do it well. Not all of these work for everybody. And interestingly, being focused and attentive to our clients is a form of mindfulness. So the occupation of massage is supportive of this. Same with breathing to a lesser extent, but breathing is an area in this whole piece of knowledge that we're discussing in chapter 15. Breathing is an area where massage can help. And it's by supporting the mechanism of breathing and by trying to support regulation between sympathetic, parasympathetic, autonomic nervous system functions. And this, you know, we can teach self-massage as well. These are all some self-massage tools and teaching people how to do these things, as well as some support for exercise. If you're going to if you're going to pay attention to anything in this chapter that you as a massage therapist can actually directly interface with as part of your massage is the breathing. So slow way down. Go back and look at this in your Essential Science book, and do become very aware of this. And in the classroom, this is an area, focus on the trunk, not just the back, but the sides and the front, that if we can just support pliability in that area, people will breathe better. And if they breathe better, their fluids move better. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. So slow down and really study this section. And there's some assessments here that we'll practice in the classroom, but are sufficient. And in your Essential Science book, I also have all of those YouTube videos that I previewed and put forth to support your learning of that content. There's information there on breathing. So, you know, this is where massage thrives. This is where we can really help on a mechanical level. And also sleep. Massage can just generally support sleep. And that's of tremendous value. And there's no fancy massage there. It's a good, solid, generalized, focused, full body massage that works for the client. So box 15.8 gives some very simple exercises that people can do to help support a more normal breathing pattern. And most of these are working because how the body is positioned is preventing the shoulders and the upper respiratory muscles that are auxiliary, they're helper, they shouldn't be used all the time. Prevent them from being able to contract. And so in order to breathe, you have to use the lower abdominal muscles and primarily the diaphragm. So practice these yourself, and these you can teach. You can even copy this off and use it as a handout. And then finally in this section, we have the mind. And I think the most important thing we can do here is listen and be compassionate and keep our mouths shut and know when to refer. So life is emotional. We are emotional beings. Sidestep, sleep hygiene. Could be another handout. So, and again, do these proficiency exercises. So back to emotions. The feelings and the emotion interplay, and feelings are a little bit more physical. They become more somatic. And then we will, through trial and error, adopt behaviors that help us feel better and avoid painful emotion. So we all do this. And some of those behaviors, like we've mentioned earlier, are resourceful. and some are no longer resourceful. They no longer serve us, but they did at one time, and we don't know how to find another way. And some of the behaviors, in fact, pretty much all behaviors, affect us on the neurochemical level. And so we can have a disturbance in our perception of how intense these feelings or these behaviors, what type of feelings they produce. So our own body is going to have more of a moderate response to the chemicals. Whereas if we take a medication or we do an extreme behavior or we use food as a coping strategy, the results of that may have a bigger intensity of a sensation. And then we become not satisfied with the more moderate. And so we keep seeking that intensity, and that becomes an underpinning in addiction. And then with chemical type addictions, if we're if we're artificially stimulating that or artificially providing these chemicals, then our body stops or slows down its own internal endogenous production, and there's a time frame. If you remove the external behavior, whether it's taking an external medication or drug, or excessive exercise, or whatever in here, it takes a while for our own body to go, oh, okay, we are deficient here, and then we need to ramp up our own production. And that's where the really distressful withdrawal comes from. And so we're just trying, people are just trying to feel better. And we need to look in the salutogenic model for ways that we can have well-being. And so, and this falls to our own self-concept about being okay, and knowing that we aren't perfect, and that we, if we do something that's very harmful, we should feel bad about that. That distress that comes from that motivates us to make amends or change our behavior so we don't do that anymore. But there's so many external demands on self-concept, from appearance to how productive you are, and all of that, that we just don't have a clear view of that anymore. This proficiency exercise helps you evaluate resourceful and less than resourceful behavior and feelings, and this interplay that we just discussed. And then how do we cope? Where's resilience? How do we bounce? How do we learn from our past, and how do we move gently into the future, and how do we focus on the right now to be able to do that? I'm not gonna even pretend that I've got this mastered. It's a work in process, and I have my own ways. But when I compare that, as I encourage you to compare, this is where the idea of coping is at. Is it an idea of commitment? And is this something that is feeding my emotions. I feel like I have purpose. Massage therapy is a really good occupation for that. So, and then the idea of control, there's internal control and external control, and external control is really tough. Again, we lived through this pandemic, and it's not been easy, and it really has brought forth this idea of internal versus external control, to really funny areas where people looked to demonstrate control, like whether they were going to wear a mask or not. That's all a control issue. So if you're okay and you don't feel like you're out of control, then you can do something as simple as wearing a mask when there is good evidence that it is helpful, not just to us, but to people around us. It doesn't become a deeply emotional idea. It's just a thing. So getting this balance in control is a very important part of well-being. And to feel as if we are able to evolve and expand and get excited about stuff and experience new learning or new environments or whatever that is to you. And to keep that within that challenge within a realm that is feeding us, restoring us, as opposed to wearing us down. And then the last piece of this is the spirit. And this section has nothing to do with religion or particular spiritual practices at all. It has to do with hope and how faith is that somehow, some way, and I can have faith in hope, and I can live from a foundation of compassion, and I am not fearful of diversity and differences, and I can find a way through faith, hope, and love to embrace my own spiritual self as well as that of others, and the environment and the plants and animals and the water, the nurturing water that flows through all of that, and I can find a way to be okay. And I can, if I have the challenge of making things better within the little sphere of influence that I have. Temple Grandin, and you can look her up, she she's one of my heroes, and she said, I would like to hope that even if there's no personal afterlife, she didn't say there isn't, but even if there isn't, some part of the universe, I don't want my thoughts to die with me. And she's done she's written books, and she's been a real advocate for, she's a animal behaviorist, and she's a real advocate there, and with also with autism. And so here's a couple of exercises that you can do to see if you can find your hope. So faith, hope, and love combined have far more strength than fear, destruction, and hate. The coming together of those who have lived a life based on faith, hope, and love, regardless of culture, religion, or past experience, forms the spiritual strength and inner peace of our present and potential future. And massage therapists play a very important but humble role in that by our nurturing, compassionate, quiet presence. So you know how to do the rest of this. Important chapter, I think.